Welcome back to another episode of the Pax What She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perry Goldstein on a very special Victory Monday. Packers traveling to Pittsburgh to take on the Aaron Rodgers-led Steelers and coming out with a W. And
Yeah.
I think we are part of that, right, Perry? Because we actively predicted that the Packers were going to lose, and
I'm not saying we should continue to do that, but maybe we should continue to do that.
it just would have been too homery to say that they were going to win 17 games. So we had to make it interesting. And that doubt clearly fueled the best performance of Jordan Love's young career.
Clearly. I mean, the first half, it looked like we were right. So,
Yeah. Happy to be wrong. Very happy to be wrong.
Yeah. Ended up being a big statement win for the Packers. Jordan Love's best statistical game of his career?
Of the regular season.
Of the regular season.
The Dallas playoff game is like the only other. Yeah.
I was like either that or his first season as a starter against the Chiefs. But yeah, best 360 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had a touchdown. I guess we're going to start with the offense, but yeah, just a big statement win to remind everybody, we are still top dogs in the NFC. How are you feeling, like, just overall after this game? I know we're going to dive into, we have very kind of specific things we want to discuss, but just your slept on it last night feeling about this game today.
I think they needed this. I think that this is a game that has the potential to be like a springboard. Like we've seen some ups and downs for the offense and the defense, especially teams like playing a full 4-quarter game, which they didn't necessarily do, right? We'll talk about that. But complimentary football, like cleaning up the mistakes. And I think that this game had the potential to get out of hand with what we saw going into the second half. Like going into halftime, it could have gone one of two ways. And of course, we know now that it went the absolute best way for this Packers team, and they responded. And, Matt LaFleur even said, like, that second half is the team that we have to be every week.
Yeah.
Because when they play like that, I don't think they lose to anyone in the NFL. So like that, I think, is now that they've hit that mark and they know what they can be. Like Matt LaFleur said, like, nobody was upset at halftime. It was just like, do the basic things better, right? Like clean up your drops, less penalties on third downs, and capitalize. Like be the functioning team that we know that we can be. And the Panthers, they've got it home. They're finishing up a really tough stretch here where they were just like, it was 4 of their last 5 on the road, and now they've got 3 of their next 4 at home.
Right.
So like you're in a really good spot now to start stacking this and building momentum because you've gotten out of like this harder stretch of travel.
Yeah. Two points I want to make from that. First is I was thinking that after this game that when the Packers are firing on all cylinders like they were in the second half, they're really scary. They're a really scary team. We've been kind of waiting for them to put it all together to like see the full potential that we've seen in spurts. And again, to your point, they did not do it in the first half. They got off a little slow, but they got it together. And the second half is like the epitome of what this team can be when they are playing up to their full potential. And it's quite scary. Easily make the case for the best team in the NFC, which they currently are. They're at the top of the standings right now. And one that you see having a deep playoff push. I do think the strength of schedule that you brought up coming up is key. They showed it before the game started. Didn't expect to start with this, but they do have a pretty, I would say, nice looking schedule coming up. No game is a gimme, but like they have the Panthers at some point coming up. They have, the only one in the future that you kind of have circled, right, is week 13 against the Lions. The rest of the NFC North, like I'm sure will give them fits because division games always do that. But they are kind of easing out of the tough stretch and into maybe like the easier home stretch of the season. I have easier in quotes. And they're 5-1-1. So out of this tough stretch, they put themselves in a really good position still, even if some of the games were ugly.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how they look against the Eagles because they've got the Panthers at home and then they've got the Eagles on Monday night. And I think that that has the potential to be a different game in Philly. You know, we saw them
Yeah.
they play in Brazil, we saw them play in Philly. So now we're going to see them hosting the Eagles. But that has their own fair of like struggles this year. Like
Yeah. I
own
was gonna say, I think that people are anecdotally afraid of the Eagles because of
because
who
of
they
last
are,
year. Yeah.
right? Coming into this season. But if you've watched the Eagles this season, they have plenty of weaknesses.
Mhm.
We'll get to that when we talk about this preview show. But I do 100% agree with you that it being at Lambeau is a different beast because the Packers at home this season have been unbeatable. Let's maybe talk then about the offense because as in terms of highlights of this game, it was certainly Jordan Love and his performance. I said at the top of the show, 360 for 3 tuds, 0 interceptions, 0 sacks. At one point, he had 20 consecutive passes caught, which ties him for the record with Brett Favre. Not even Aaron Rodgers ever did that. Just an absolute. We called it when we were texting during the game, his Superman game, because he really put the cape on and just said, "Yeah, I got this. I'm just going to sling it, and we're going to win this thing." I loved it. He had any number. We can talk about like our favorite Jordan Love throw in this game because there's a few, but he was really showcasing like why he is the special player that they took in the first round and invested all that time and capital into, because he can really be one of the best in the league. I loved watching him put the team on his back and say, all right, the run game is like not doing what we need it to. I'm just going to sling this thing and we're going to get it done. Just super, super efficient and super accurate throughout the entire game.
Yeah, the stat you were bringing up, like him with he ended with like 360 something yards, but he became the first quarterback in NFL history to have over 350 passing yards in a game while also throwing 3 touchdowns with no turnovers or sacks. Like the first QB to ever do that.
That's crazy.
So that, you know, big time moment. And we talked about it, right? Like we've said it on the show before. We've seen it like kind of in spurts, the latter half of like his first year as a starter. Toyotathon coming up, right? Playoffs in Dallas, but like he has yet to have like that like vintage game, right? Like the old school, like we said, like Superman game. And I think you could have approached this a couple different ways, kind of going into this game as like, is it going to be kind of what we would see or we saw in Dallas, where it's like 40-40 and you know whatever quarterback has the ball last wins? Like is Aaron Rodgers also gonna to have that kind of outing? And as like maybe nostalgic as that would have been, right? Like for the fun of it, like just to see it one last time, assuming the Packers come out on top, obviously, to see such a dominant performance from Jordan and then see Aaron Rodgers not have like a great game, I
Yeah.
think made it so much more of that like Superman game for him because he wasn't going toe to toe with one of the best. He was like by a large margin, just like outshining the clear best player on the field.
Yeah.
And that was really cool for him to have that moment.
Yeah. I think outside the lore of it being Aaron Rodgers and all
Right.
that this kind of like meant for both teams, or so I should say Aaron and the Packers. If you kind of take Aaron Rodgers as the person out of it, Jordan Love just went up against one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And while he is, yes, in the twilight of his career, probably he's retiring after this season, you kind of always have that comparison point, even though the quarterbacks don't play each other, right? They play the opposing defenses. It's always going to be QB versus QB in everybody's minds. And to your point, Jordan was the clear best player. Like, he was the better player. It makes it a little bit more outstanding that it was, you know, the guy that he was succeeding for this position. And it's no, you know, nothing to Aaron. I thought he did what he could.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into the Packers defense in a little bit and their ability to shut down the Steelers offense in the second half. But Jordan was, you know, he was like for so long the heir apparent, and can he step into these shoes? And even during the game, it's like all the comparisons that he gets to his predecessors, both Favre and Rodgers. And then you have a game like this in this moment on Sunday Night Football, and you say, no, I'm not anybody else. I'm me. I'm
Yeah.
10, and I lead this team now, and this is the kind of player that I am. I thought that was really cool for him,
Yeah.
like on a personal level.
Yeah, and just to like kind of touch on like how incredible some of these stats are, right? Because you could look at the box score and be like, wow, he had a really good game. We talked about like the first player in history to put up this kind of stat line. But 20 straight completions, like you mentioned already. Next Gen Stats had that as a 0.1% chance of completing all 20 passes based on the difficulty of each pass thrown. So we're not just talking about like 20 little dink and dunks for like 2 yards, right? Like he had a 0.1% chance of making that happen. Next Gen Stats also had Love completing 13 of 17 of his passes against man coverage for 232 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that was the most yards against man coverage in a game all season by any quarterback.
Wow.
So like just a very, very dominant performance from the quarterback. And I think maybe that's a good way to segue here into the rest of the offense, because as we were talking right yesterday, as it was happening live, there were certainly pieces that we wanted to highlight, right? Christian Watson coming back looked phenomenal in his return on a snap count, 4 of 4, 85 yards.
85. Okay, I know he had the big catch, so that's the bulk of the yards, but I was fully expecting him to be like ease in, not play a lot of snaps. He was hella important in this game.
Mm-hmm.
He had 2 hugely important catches.
Yeah.
First, the deep shot to him was a drop in the bucket. I mean, just one of the most insane. I've rewatched it maybe 5 times today, and I'm like, how
Yeah.
did he get it? Oh, and Christian Watson in general is we've known this is so important to this offense, what he brings to the table. His speed, not just his speed, but his deep threat ability. You forget like what a size mismatch he is against smaller corners. And the way he opens it up for everybody else. So I know there's a few other players you want to talk about, but just so good to have him back on the field.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd be remiss, right, to not talk about Tucker Kraft
Obviously.
and his career night on National Tight Ends Day. But no, 7 of 9, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. Was it like 130 something of those yards came after the catch? So like just a completely dominant performance by him too, without a doubt. He is absolutely in the conversation, if not the top right now, as like a top 3 tight end in the league. And it's something that we've talked about this Packers offense lacking for years, right? Like just it's been a long
Michael
time.
Finley.
Yeah, absolutely. And to finally have that type of weapon as a tight end, in addition to the other pieces like Christian Watson coming back. Last night we talked about how like Jaden Reed hasn't even factored into this offense yet. When he comes back, you've got Matthew Golden, who is still, looking for his first NFL touchdown, is like working his way into more reps in the offense.
I gotta say that guy was open so much in this game. Yeah. So much. And like eventually Jordan is gonna find him. Mm-hmm. He's gonna look his way, or I don't know, maybe Golden is read 3 and Jordan's, getting to read 1 and 2 first. But there's going to be a point where that starts to connect because he is open way too much to not be getting the ball.
Yeah, I agree. Before we shift, I do want to mention Dusty Eveleaf, good friend of the show. Just think they're interesting to look at. So last night, the Packers were in 11 personnel, which if you're unfamiliar, is 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers. 56.5% of the time led to 7.6 yards per attempt, 5 explosives, and 3 touchdowns. When they were in 12 personnel, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, they were at 42%. They were in that formation, 7.3 yards per attempt, 5 explosives, and 1 touchdown. And then they were in 13, 1% of the time, which is 1 running back, 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver for 1.6% of snaps and 0.0 yards per attempt. And he did mention as well that there was a big shift between the 2 halves of play. In the first half, they were in 11 quite a bit of the time, like 76% of the time. And 12 personnel was only 6 snaps in the first half. And then that shifted in the second half. They were only in 11 on 16 snaps. And then 12 personnel on 20 snaps. And you can see kind of the results of that. So interesting to see how Matt LaFleur utilized some of his players. Obviously, like we said, Christian Watson coming back makes a difference, and like who you're trying to get out on the field at one time.
That is interesting. I mean, it did feel like, we saw they were moving the ball much better, but they were also running the ball better in the second half.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if like you get that extra tight end out there to block, how much help that is. I do, before we move away, I do want to talk about the run game, because I don't know, like Josh Jacobs is on pace to have more yards this season than he did last year, but it's not matching the eye test for me. I'm trying to figure out why. It feels like he's just not being blocked as well up front, and he's like really fighting for those yards. I mean, especially in this game, he averaged 2.5 yards a carry, which is really low. That is low for him. I don't know if it's the injury. I don't know if it's the offensive line, but at the same token, Emmanuel Wilson, when he was put in, had 2 less carries, so 11 carries versus Josh's 13, and had double the yards, 61 yards for 5.5 yards a carry. So this is not a statement, right? There's so much that goes into the run game, but I'm not loving the run calls and the situational run calls. So that's also could be part of it for sure. I mean, everyone and their mother knows that the Packers are going to run on 2nd and long now. Like, I know it sitting on my couch.
We've known it for like 3 years.
Of course, the Steelers know it. So like maybe we shoot that play call into the sun, Matt. But I am, like, you and I in our pregame show for this game said, like, this game goes as Josh Jacob goes. Obviously, we did not predict Jordan Love going scorched earth through the air, but he can't do that every game. So I just have my eye on this. Again, I think statistically they're still having a very efficient season on the ground. It's just this situational choices in the run game that I have questions about.
Yeah. They're 5th right now in the league, 5th in rushing attempts, 16th in rushing yards, which I think is kind of telling. But Matt LaFleur, like, they did ask him about this kind of post game, and he did agree, that there were certainly struggles on the ground. But his counterpoint to that, I think, touches on what you said, where he was like, it was really hard to call run plays when Jordan was so efficient with the football. Like, you want to let him sling it when he's on fire. But to your point, like you said, that's not a sustainable business model to just do that every single game.
No, I wanted them to let Jordan sling it. You could tell this game, like, just let him throw the ball because that is what's working well. I also, to this point, and like, this is no shade, both of these players you and I have watched for a very long time, and they're excellent, but they have Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay on the outside. They're not exactly in the prime of their career.
Right.
So let's get the mismatches that we want against some very savvy and smart veteran corners who are maybe not at the top of their speed that can, hang with this Packers offense. And like, that's what they ended up doing, right? They exploited the Steelers clearly need some tackling help. They exploited that with Tucker Kraft. They did an excellent job in the second half. And I understand why you go into the game wanting to be balanced. And then they course corrected in the second half and said, okay, the run game is not doing it for us. This is going to be where we just let Jordan shine. And I'm happy about the course correction. I mean, you said it. Matt was calling different personnel groupings. I mean, they met the moment. So it's hard for me to be upset necessarily about how the first half went because there were clear, changes mid-game, which is really all that you can do. I mean, if your game plan going into the game, this is how I feel at least about the tale of two halves of it all. Like, if your game plan going into the game is not working and you make adjustments and then those adjustments work, you're doing your job as a coach. It's not necessarily your fault that what you thought would work well on tape isn't working well in practice. My issue would be if they didn't fix it in the second half. It was just the same old, but it wasn't. So I think that deserves to be kind of called out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's just like, to further your point before we shift to the defense, like, it's just an interesting comparison to last year, because last year they were 5th in attempts, 5th in yards, and like 4th in yards per attempt. So like, you were getting the production with the number of attempts. This year, like I said, they're 5th in attempts, 16th in yards, 24th in yards per attempt. So certainly just something to keep an eye on. Like, and I do think the offensive line is playing a big role in this, obviously. Like, as they, last week it seemed like Jordan Morgan had won the right guard job. This week they're back rotating him with Sean Ryan. Like,
Right.
there's just some clear things I think that this offensive line needs to figure out that certainly will make a difference.
Right.
But yeah, so curious to see how they look. The Panthers do have a good front, so another opportunity to see what this run game looks like next week. But let's shift then. I think we could talk about this offense for a very long time. It was such a fun game, but shifting to the defensive side of the ball, because they are also deserving of some flowers, right? They
are.
held the Steelers to 1 of 10 on third down, which I think was, one of the keys to the game. Rashawn Gary had 2 sacks. He's now at 7.5 on the season, ties his 2024 total already. His career high is 9.5. So he is by far on pace to, eclipse that total. Micah Parsons had 1 sack. He's at 6.5 on the season. His career high is 14. So we'll have to see.
Wow.
But you and I talked about it. What a game for Devontae Wyatt being back. Like, just such a difference with him in the middle of the defense.
Mm-hmm. The difference it makes is actually astronomical. And I mean, Jaylen Warren is notoriously difficult to take down. He's notoriously difficult to tackle. The Packers obviously had plenty of, issues. Like, he got his, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. But Devontae Wyatt in the middle there, putting interior pressure on Aaron Rodgers and allowing the edges to get to him was huge. And Rodgers made his plays out of the pocket, as he's going to do, but he's certainly much less efficient when he's having that level of pressure. And it just goes to show how important Devontae Wyatt is up the middle. I also thought, like, Carl Brooks had a great game. Colby Wooden had a great game. Like, everyone on that line had an excellent game. But I do think that getting someone, a starter, back like that has the trickle down effect of allowing everyone else to do their jobs better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, we talked about it, like, with Mina Kimes, right, early in the season, where everyone was so intrigued by this matchup because this defense has struggled a little bit when an offense's quick game gets going, and that's what Aaron Rodgers has been good at this season, was getting the quick game, getting the ball out, lightning speed, and the Packers pass rush made it so he was unable to do that, and they made him really uncomfortable, right? Like, they disrupted his rhythm the entirety of the second half, and that is what led to this comeback, right? Like, we saw Packers miss their field goal to go into halftime. Steelers are starting with the ball. They had the opportunity for, like, the dreaded double up that has been the Achilles of this Packers team all season, and instead the offense goes 3 and out, and the Packers get the ball back. They get nice field position, and the rest, is history. So I think that is a big key here. Was the pass rush just made Aaron Rodgers so uncomfortable the entire game. But I also want to give some credit to the other first-round pick from the 2022 draft class, Quay Walker. I thought that he's had such a good season. He's so comfortable opposite Edgerrin Cooper. They're becoming, like, a really dynamic inside linebacking tandem. And his maturity, they talked to Rashawn Gary about it after the game, like, DK Metcalf, like, poking him in the eyes, and he's like, 2022 Quay would have just got ejected. Like, this is so to be able to just, like, walk away, don't get a penalty, you understand the importance of where you're at in the game, don't do anything silly. It just, his evolution this season has been really fun to watch and really impactful for the defense.
The growth and maturity is very clearly there, because it's not just off the field, but also the way he plays on the field too, and what he's been able to do this season. I agree. We have to shout out one more player, and it's CV, Carrington Valentine. We said it last week. We're like, we have Carrington Valentine. Why do we have to play Nate Hobbs on the boundary? And I guess the Packers agreed, because I'm pretty sure Nate Hobbs took 6 snaps in this game. Carrington Valentine, right? 4, 6, something like that. Like, very little.
3 of them were in the slot, which I want to talk about. So
we'll talk about it then. CV took over the boundary all game. And I have to say, going up against DK Metcalf, not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. There's also a ginormous size mismatch on that one, and he was up to the task. The corner room had a rough night. Nixon, especially, obviously, Carrington had, I think, 1 or 2 impactful penalties as well, which comes with playing aggressively the way he does. That is kind of the catch-22 of the type of player he is. But he saved a touchdown, like, literally knocked a touchdown out of DK's hands. He just played I missed that room has like missed his energy. They've missed his swag. They've missed his "you can't mess with us" attitude and the play to back it up. So I think that he has earned the right to stay on the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what choices they make moving forward.
Yeah, so just the thing I wanted to mention, Peter Bukowski pulled these numbers, and I thought that they made a lot of sense. But, I know that we've discussed, like, it's challenging to think about where you play Nate Hobbs because you want to try him in the slot, but Javon Bullard has played so well in the slot that how do you take reps away from him? And he said that they actually played Nate Hobbs in the slot 3 snaps. 2 of those snaps were nullified by penalty. So he had like one true snap in the slot. And it was in a third down, like obvious third and long passing situation. Because when you're talking about like coverage ability, that's probably where you want him. You probably want to sub out Javon Bullard. But when you're talking like first and second down, Bullard is the guy. And Bullard got to play a little bit of safety, like true safety as well in the game. So I think they're doing a nice job of like figuring out where some of these pieces fit and getting them different looks in different packages. So curious to see, what that looks like if Nate Hobbs gets more looks in the slot next week against the Panthers. But I do think I agree with you 100% that Carrington Valentine deserves the opportunity to stay a starting boundary corner until further notice.
Yeah. That rotation is interesting to me. I am curious to see how that continues. I mean, I don't have a lot. I think the defense just like played well. I mean, they gave up 16 points in the first half. Okay. They held them essentially to 3 in the second half. The touchdown late was just, it was too late. I felt at that point for the Steelers to make any like meaningful comeback, but and then they stopped the 2-point conversion. I think this defense played, again, they had a really tough first half from a penalty perspective, and they need to get those cleaned up because high-powered offenses are going to exploit that more than the Steelers were able to do. And the Packers pass rush is not going to just be like the elimination factor in that they would like it to be in every single game. However, I thought, again, tale of two halves, turned it around in the second half and played really, really shut down the way that we expect them to be able to play. I do have to ask you, because I'm curious, like, are we worried about Keyshawn Nixon? Is this like a fluky game? Like, what's the deal? Where's our panic meter currently?
It's hard, right? Because like we talk about it with the trade deadline fast approaching next week, like the idea that help is not on the way, right? Like we don't think the Packers are going to go out and make any wholesale changes to the boundary. So what is your option, right? Like you had Micah Robinson on the practice squad. He just got picked up by the Titans for their active roster. Like who are you looking at? If it's like, do you try Carrington Valentine and Nate Hobbs on the boundaries? Probably not. Like, so I think Nixon he had decent coverage on a lot of plays. It's just some of the fluky stuff and the penalties. Like there are certainly things to clean up, and I think that you know he's going to have to. But I'm not hitting the panic button yet, but it's certainly not the Keyshawn that we were like raving about to start the season. You can tell where opposing quarterbacks are going to be looking, to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, before we kind of wrap up, I did want to touch on, like you had mentioned, the Steelers putting up 16 in the first half. And I think not to harp on special teams, but like most teams, right? It's not 16 points. Like you have Chris Boswell, who has one of the best legs in the entire NFL, making these long 50 something yard kicks. Like it is a tough place to kick in Pittsburgh. So if you're playing anybody else, like potentially that defense, like they were shutting down the Steelers offense. The Steelers were just lucky that they could capitalize and put points on the board. I think in some of those moments, like the defense didn't give up like a heck of a lot of yardage, which, was telling. I think most teams are not converting some of those field goals. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to say about the defense was just once again, like having a really nice time defending the run. 93 points, 93 yards allowed on the ground. They've only given up 100 yards once this season, and it was to Dallas, a game that went into overtime. So like doing a nice job containing the run.
Yeah.
They're first in attempts and fourth in yards per attempt in the league, third in rushing yards allowed. So just, challenging opposing quarterbacks to have to throw the ball, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how the cornerbacks continue to play the rest of the season.
Depends on what we see from our cornerbacks. I will say the one play that I really enjoyed that I was really upset that got ended up not mattering was oh my God, my brain is Evan Williams pass breakup. I'm sorry, that took me 5 years to think of his name. It's really late. I'm tired. I love the way he's playing right now. And I feel like you and I never talk about the safeties on this team because they're just like always doing what they're supposed to be doing. And like there haven't been many splash plays. And I think they're to come, or teams have just learned not to throw near Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams. But when they get near the ball, they do stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So again, to your point earlier, I was just thinking about this, like to the way that they're going to rotate. The way Jeff Hafley is going to kind of maybe potentially rotate some players in and out on the back end. I am curious to see if any of that impacts or doesn't impact like their ability to make plays on the ball, because when they do it, they can really impact the game.
Yeah. So any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I mean, this was a big statement win. Really good. I mean, going into this, the Steelers were 4-2. Like they were an excellent team. They're in first in the AFC North. And the Packers really took it to them. I again think they needed this kind of win. By no means like an easy, the Steelers rolled over type of game, but the Packers' ability to become incredibly dominant in the second half really says a lot to like who they are and who they can be, and like I think like the mental longevity of a season, right? When you're down going into half and you had a half that you did and you're like nothing was really going that right besides one touchdown, you could easily let that affect the rest of the game. And instead they're like, no. Like the mentality is there. And we forget they're still a very young team.
Youngest in the league. Always.
Lately. And I think that and like some of the comments that I've heard from guys post game, like Tucker Kraft's words in the locker room and the way Jordan Love has been very vocal. Like we talked about Quay Walker's maturity, but I think like maturity across the roster has been like very evident to me, especially in these wins the last couple of weeks. Just like maybe some ugly wins, maybe a win that took a second to get there, like this game was. And again, I think that's where like I have confidence that they can make it through kind of these tougher stretches, or especially like well into January and hopefully February of this season.
Yeah, so we're recording this obviously on Monday evening, but there is a case, right? You could say it's the Lions who the Packers beat, but like the Steelers at this point in the season potentially were or like the first or second toughest team that the Packers have faced so far this season. So to come out with this type of not just like good performance, but like a really dominant 3-ish of the 4 quarters, like that is the foundational piece that I think is going to springboard them down the rest of the stretch. Other like just, noteworthy things. Second straight week with a takeaway on defense, second straight game with no turnover on offense. So like we talked about turnovers being volatile, but it's nice to see them like playing clean football, protecting the ball, and then getting turnovers finally on the defensive side of the ball. And then the last just like fun tidbit, right? Going into this game, Packers hadn't won in Pittsburgh since 1970. Like Bart Starr was the last quarterback to do it.
We not talked about this. You're so right. This is a really tough away game for them environmentally. Yeah. Favre didn't do it. Rodgers didn't do it.
Just add that feather to Jordan Love's cap, right? His Superman game. But I think that does it. This is a fun one. Very absolutely fun. A ton of fun to watch, and weird to see Rodgers, of course, on the other sideline, but he was very complimentary of Jordan Love, very complimentary of Packer fans, talked about the Go Pack Go chants in Pittsburgh and how he's heard it for 18 years, right? Said they had to use the silent count at home. So if you were there, absolutely great job as Packer fans, traveling very well to get there and to represent him. What a game you got to see. But we'll be back later this week to talk about Packers back at home, talking about facing the Panthers. Find the show everywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Like and subscribe if you don't already at Pax What She Said or PWSS Podcast. Perri at Perri_Goldstein, me at Maggie J. Loney. And enjoy this one. You can, it's Victory Monday. It can be Victory Tuesday. Just let it ride for the rest of the week because this was a statement. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.